How's your Monday been?
Good. I was up early. We have a local, he was CrossFit, Greg Glassman's right-hand man, Savon. He lives here locally. So I was on his show at 7 a.m. So
Nice,
yeah,
nice.
already
How'd that
starting off
go?
good.
Good. Awesome.
How about you?
Awesome.
How's your Monday?
It's been good. It's been good. I always teach 5 a.m., 6 a.m., and 10 a.m. class on Mondays. So just wrapped that up and got home and ready to rock and roll, baby.
Yeah. How's that 5 a.m. class? It's dark and cold.
It is dark. It is dark. I'm a ridiculously early guy, so I've been doing 5 a.m.s for 7 years, and I love 5 a.m. classes, so they're great.
Are you that like annoyingly cheerful person really early in the morning?
Probably so. Probably so. I'd like to think that I'm somewhat knowledgeable that a lot of people see it as annoyingly cheerful. And so I'm not like necessarily maybe too much in your face, but I would say most of the people that come to my 5 a.m. classes are like somewhat similar personality.
For sure, for sure. And I personally always appreciate it because I'm not the most cheerful in the morning. So I appreciate when other people are that person.
Yeah, yeah. Well, good deal. Well, appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being on. So my first question, what is corrective exercise? What is that you do?
Yeah, it's basic. Well, so that's a certification that I have. That's basically learning how to prevent injuries and then
Mm.
navigate exercise when people are experiencing pain, and
Oh,
so
okay.
hopefully can correct them out of pain, if you will.
And by correcting them, is that like building up strength, just avoiding injury? How do you correct that?
It's a little bit of both. It's just like, identifying which exercises not to do. It's identifying weak muscles that are underdeveloped, muscles that are overactive, what needs to be loosened up, what needs to be strengthened, and that sort of thing, I would say.
Hmm. And do you find that most people have something, like everybody has some sort of
I would say
ailment?
I would say definitely I would say most of the people that a lot of people I work with come in with something. It's hard to coach somebody for too long and have them not experience something, whether something was came up in a actual training session or it came up just in something else in their life. And so I would say there's not very many people who I haven't had to bring up anything with regards to that.
Mm. Yeah, definitely seems that way because I coach up at the center 1 day a week, but it seems like almost everybody has a past injury or something that is bothering them that
Well,
that always flares in the gym.
it's mainly because movement pattern coaching, if you did sports when you were younger, maybe you got taught it, but also if you didn't have a personal trainer, you might have just had a group person and they maybe didn't teach it as specifically to you, which is not necessarily their fault. They've got a lot of people they got to take care of. And so usually people have movement patterns that are not perfected. And when done repeatedly for years and years and years, that'll turn into some sort of issue, some sort of underdevelopment, some sort of overcorrection and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I love that. I talk to people about that a lot, that pre-CrossFit, because CrossFit gets a bad name for injuries and whatnot. But I've told a lot of people, like after I had my daughter, I threw my back out because I had her on my hip and I bent down. And anyway, I was in chiropractor for years and years and years, prevented me from working out for years and years and years because of this injury. And then finally I started CrossFit and still chiropractor years and years while I built my core. But then finally I got to a point where my core was so strong that I haven't needed to go to a chiropractor in years now. And but I think, again, it's being patient, it's continuing to work those weaknesses and not expect like instant results and going through, some uncomfortableness and pain to get to the point where your body has a strong foundation.
yeah, I think that is one of the things that can be difficult to assess the difference between and is sometimes you kind of have to work through some pain when you're looking to eradicate pain and determining what pain is like no stop versus work through it a little bit. When it comes to correction and injury prevention or injury management, sometimes that can be a little bit difficult.
Yeah. Do you also find that people don't have the patience to work through like some of that stuff?
Honestly, I think most of my experience is people don't have the patience to not do something if it's just a little bit of pain when they should not do it. They just think I'm
Mm,
going to work through it and it's not going to turn into anything. And it might not turn into anything at the end of that session. It might not turn into anything in the next month or next year, but over time it might. And so I think one of the things that I can sometimes struggle to get across to people is like, I know it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal to have a little bit of pain now, but like, let's stop doing this and do something else so that we can
mm,
um, protect the future version of ourselves.
mm. That's good advice. I was talking with some of my people that work for me, and we were talking about, because we've all been CrossFitting like 12 years. It's been a really long time. And when we've gotten injuries and when we haven't gotten injuries, and for a lot of us, it feels like the injuries actually happen outside the gym. Like, for example, we were all kicking the ball around, and I just kicked the ball, but it sent the shooting pain, up my sciatica or whatever that nerve is, and I was out. And again, it wasn't the heavy deadlifting I was doing that morning, but it's randomly kicking a ball that afternoon. But again, it's just like interesting where injuries can occur, and it's if we're not keeping like a tight form all the time, that's, I think, more likely when you're going to get hurt, as opposed to in the gym where you're really paying attention, being mindful of technique and breathing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. When you're outside of it, you're not focused on your form as much. You're a little bit more lackadaisical. And oftentimes, just when you're doing things outside of it, the movement pattern or the angle at which you carry load or lift load is going to be a little bit different of an angle. And so, yeah, that you can often be more susceptible to injury outside of the gym. It's so many people, if they don't have that much of a history of exercise, they might be scared to strength train because they're afraid to get hurt.
Hmm.
But are afraid to experience some sort of pain, but it's like you're going to experience pain one way or another. You're just going to have to decide which one you wanted to choose yourself. And so, anyways, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that's always my defense to people who talk about, oh, CrossFit, don't people get injured? And I'm like, look, I'd rather get injured doing something super badass than get injured by getting out of bed wrong because I have no muscles or foundation or anything in my body. I'd much rather get hurt doing something badass.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So your 10-week transformation, what does that look like?
Yeah, so it's a health and fitness program that really has its foundation in a goal setting methodology that I created that I call the 5 steps to goal success. And so it's a 5-step goal setting methodology that essentially gets people to execute amidst the chaos of their life. Because a lot of the people that I coach and that I work with, and just a lot of the people out there who are listening, for the most part, kind of know what they're supposed to do, but they don't do it. And usually one of the biggest reasons why that is because we are driven individuals who are trying to achieve in all areas of our life. And oftentimes when we're trying to achieve in all other areas of life, health can be the one that takes a backseat.
Hmm.
And I honestly think that one of the biggest reason why that is because we're very immediate gratification type society. And for the most part, exercise doesn't give you that instant gratification. It gives you instant pain. And then on the other side of that might be like a little bit more instant gratification, but we do things that we can see move the needle in the short term. So we check off things on the to-do list that are easy to get done and they give us that little bit of hit of dopamine. And so exercise often takes a backseat. And so I pride our 10-week transformation in being the thing that helps busy parents, that helps busy professionals, that helps driven individuals reprioritize their health and fitness and change how they view it and change how they go about planning it in their schedule. And so it's through this 5 steps to goal success methodology through which I kind of help change people's mindsets about it.
I love that. And you're right. So many people that I meet around the world, like, I just don't have time for that. Like, how do you have time? And I notice, like, yeah, when you have kids and yeah, things get very challenging. I think it's more of like a capacity issue. And there really does have to be something that's got to give in order to build that foundation. But then when maybe you're not contending with kids and all that, there's a lot more capacity so you can prioritize. But by then you're so conditioned to not have yourself as a priority that I think it's hard for a lot of people to say, I'm worth that, and that is time well spent. I should be spending my time doing that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different reasons why we don't prioritize it. And I think you hit the nail on the head. can feel good about ourselves if we're doing something for somebody else. We can feel bad about ourselves if we're doing something for ourselves. But the way do we combat that from a mindset standpoint is realizing that when we're doing something for ourselves, we are actually doing it for other people. That's why in the first step of my goal setting methodology, I help people build out their why. And part of that why is to identify the people in your life that you have the ability to positively impact because of the changes that you're going to make. Like I have somebody who just started with the 10-week transformation with me, who her wife has also been struggling with her body image and her confidence, and she hasn't been going to the gym as much. And so she's really excited to get going herself so that hopefully it motivates and inspires her. And she was just telling me before she left class today that she meal prepped with her wife for the first time that they had ever even done it before, because her wife was always the one that cooked. And she always felt maybe like a burden or a load on her own shoulders. And now they did it together, and they actually had fun doing it together. And it was healthier than it would normally be. And so I think that's one of the huge things to combat that first issue of why some people don't prioritize it, is because they see it as a selfish endeavor when it's actually a pretty selfless endeavor when you know that it can positively impact other people. And then, as I said before, I think oftentimes because we're somewhat of an instant gratification society, if we do spend a little bit of time during exercise, but we don't exactly know what we're doing or why we're doing it, then we don't see the needle move. Often that might be seeing the needle move from a weight loss perspective, or that might be seeing the needle move from a feeling more in shape or a feeling stronger. And if you're not doing exercise intentionally, then that workout that you just did, or the workouts that you just did for a week, you feel like that was a waste of time. So why even do it in the first place? And so I think the second thing is making sure that there's some structure and intentionality to what it is, to combat the excuse of, well, it's what I'm doing is not even worth the time.
Mm. Yeah. And again, there's that instant gratification. I think your 10-week program, and I was just doing the math in my head, why Andy Frisella's 75 hard is so impactful is because it's enough time to get those feelings and establish that healthy habit. I think it says like 66 days to establish a new healthy, or new any habit really. And so like you need that kind of duration to get people to make this a part of their lifestyle. Like it should be a lifestyle. It shouldn't just be like a fad diet or something I did and now I feel better and I'm all fixed. Like it truly has to be enough time where people can see this as a lifestyle that they don't want to get away from, because maybe they're not losing as much as they used to. Maybe they're not adding as much muscle as they used to, but they feel good, and that's good enough.
Yeah. When it comes to the whole how long does it take to establish a habit, a lot of people will throw out number of days or timelines like that. I think really what it comes down to, and this is what I communicate to people in my 10-week transformation, is it starts with changing your habits, but ultimately changing your habits has to change into a transformation in your identity for it to stick. Because there's so many of these timeline programs that exist, whether it's my 10-week transformation, a 75 hard, a whole 30. There's all these timelined programs that people do really well in. But then after it's over, some people will continue it, some people will fall off. And to me, the separator is the people who fall off. What they do is they create two different identities of themselves. They create the identity of Angie, who is in the middle of 75 hard, and then the identity of Angie, who is done with 75 hard. They create the identity of Nick, who's in the middle of the 10-week transformation, and the identity of Nick, who's outside of the 10-week transformation. And they see those two different individuals as having two different lifestyles and two different habits. And so I try to communicate to my people that the habits that we're forming are lifestyle habits that are supposed to become part of who you are, not just what you're doing in this season of life. Now, sometimes there's people who are looking after a goal whose habits are going to be more extreme during a particular season of life for a particular reason. Sure. But oftentimes the people that I'm working with, we need to realize that this isn't something that you're doing just for this timeline, just to achieve a result. This is something that you're doing in this timeline so that you can build a new identity for yourself of somebody who does go to the gym 4 times a week or 5 times a week, somebody who does eat a protein and a vegetable at every single meal, somebody who is more conscious of their fiber intake, somebody who is regularly drinking water throughout the day, somebody who is prioritizing their sleep. And I think once you can create that link to these habits are supposed to become part of who I am and who I'm going to continue to be, that's what creates the lasting change. And to me, that's really when people say, how long does it take a habit to stick? It's really how long does the person adopt that habit as part of their identity? And
Yeah.
so I think your identity is one, what you see yourself repeatedly doing, which is your habits. It's also two, who you tell yourself you are, because
Mm.
I think that it's really important to communicate to yourself that I am this type of person, not this is what I'm doing during this period of time. And then it's three, it's what are you really committed to? Not that you're hoping to form these habits, not that you're trying to form these habits, but you're planning to do these habits. You're expecting to do these habits. You know, a lot of coaches say don't hope to win, expect to win. And that's exactly what
Mm.
that is. So if we can see ourselves repeatedly doing the habits, that helps to solidify that identity. If we can change the way that we talk to ourselves, that helps to solidify that identity. And if we are truly committed to whatever it is that we are progressing towards, then that helps to really solidify your identity as well. Therefore, making sure the habits actually stick.
Mm. So is it your experience that people who complete the 10 weeks, they're now that's part of their lifestyle and they go on to live happy, healthy lives and they don't need to do another 10 weeks because it's just who they are?
Yeah, well, so luckily, so many of my clients love the 10 weeks that they just rinse and repeat and do it over and over again.
Yeah.
I've who've done the 10 weeks 9, 10, 11, 12 times. And I am probably a non-savvy business person when I say this to all my clients, but I'm like, my goal is for you not to need me.
Yeah.
Like, I love it when you kind of like feel like you need me because that keeps you coming back from a business perspective. But I want people to not feel like they need somebody else to hold them accountable. Because one of the phrases that I hear most from people is, I know I can't hold myself accountable, so I know I need a trainer. Oh, I know I need to go to class. And I do understand that because we all benefit from accountability. And I think we should all seek accountability. But I think it's way too helpless and powerless of a feeling to think that you can't do it on your own. I think I would like people to think that I can do it on my own. I'm just going to get better results if I do it with somebody else. So maybe I can maintain my current level of health and my current level of fitness if I am on my own, but I can achieve next level health and next level fitness when I do it with somebody else, or when I have Nick or somebody else as a trainer. And so long story short is, with regards to the question, a lot of people will do it again and continually do it. And so they continue to make it a priority. And then there are some of my clients that, yes, when I contact them 3 weeks down the road, 9 weeks down the road, 12 weeks down the road, they're still killing it. But inevitably, there's going to be people who fall off. And to me, I always have people in week 9 and in week 10. I ask them the questions like, okay, if you're not doing this next round, what is exactly your definition of success from your fitness routine going to look like moving forward? And like, let's continue to plan ahead and continue to do some of these habits that we do in the 10-week transformation. Because and that's one of the things that I kind of take a hit almost like emotionally and psychologically when I see a past client who hasn't kept up. I'm like, I beat myself up. I'm like, what did I do wrong? What could I have done better so that it did become more of their identity? And so that's what I'm continually working
Mm.
on, so that people can maintain the level of results outside of me, but hopefully they still see me as somebody who can up level their results and stuff.
Yeah, well, I agree. I think some people, and I know I did this my whole life, was sort of the fad diet, fad exercising, where I go all in and I reach a goal, and then I just celebrate that moment and all that hard work. And I don't want to say it goes to waste, but it's definitely like then you're not feeling good, then it's your ego, and then it's like, oh, all you remember is the sacrifice, like gave up so much to be like that. And am I in a place where I can do that? And so I repeated that cycle for so many years. And it took not doing 75 hard once, but like 4 or 5 times over 3 years, where that became like the majority of my life, not like the exception to my life, before I finally, incorporated enough of it. I haven't done it in probably a year, but but I also know myself, like I don't, like you said, need it in order to be healthy, body, mind. It's just now a lifestyle. It's what I do. In fact, I love the flexibility of what that looks like for me today.
Yeah, I think we often give fad diets and fad fitness things a bad rap. And I think there's some, legitimacy, or there's reason for it to a certain extent, but it's always up to the responsibility of the individual for how they move forward after it. And I do think that one of the things that they do sometimes tend to lead people towards is that all or nothing mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the easiest way that I can explain it to somebody is we oftentimes wear that all in or all or nothing mindset with a badge of honor, because anytime we've been all in the past, we've gotten amazing results and we've done really well, whether that's health and fitness or any other area of our life. And so when we're all in, we get great results. But the all or nothing mindset literally assumes that nothing is coming. And while all might give you great results, nothing is going to give you the exact opposite. And so I don't think being all in is bad. What I think you need to do is, when you finish the timeline of what you're going to be all in, identify what an in between looks like. And so one of the things I often talk about with people is you have to be okay with redefining what success looks like with your health and fitness routine, given the different seasons of your life. Because there might be a time when work is not crazy, your relationships aren't crazy, your personal life isn't crazy, and you can do 75 hard. Right after that, maybe it's holiday season, maybe it's summer vacation, and you're not going to be able to do 75 hard. And so that doesn't mean you should do nothing, but that means you need to tailor your definition of success given the season of life that you're in.
Yeah. Well, and it's so much easier to like maintain your gains than to backslide all that work and then have to climb that hill again and then backslide all that work. And, and that's where I really struggle, and why I like probably your program and also 75 hard is there's no cheats. It's like interesting because you get into this habit of, I'm going to eat really good, be really good 6 days a week, but the weekends, like that's where I can like reward myself for all this hard work. And it's almost just like constantly treading water. It's 6 days of like diligent work to blow it all over one day to reward yourself for all your hard work. It's like this weird like self-sabotage, which is why I like 75 hard, and probably similar to yours, where you don't build in those cheat days, so you're not constantly sort of holding yourself back a little bit by rewarding yourself.
Yeah, I think from the way that I usually talk about stuff like that with my clients is, I'll give you a specific example. One of my clients a while back had the goal of, she wanted to lose. She came in before week 1 to me that she was like, I want to lose 20 pounds in 10 weeks. I was like, okay, let's talk about it. Let's look at what you have going on over these next 10 weeks. And she identified that, and then before that, I was like, to lose 20 pounds in 10 weeks, that's an average about 2 pounds a week for 10 weeks. That's possible, but you have to be dialed in. You're going to have to be hitting all these nutritional goals. You're going to be hitting all your fitness goals. So I'm not saying you can't do it, but you've got to be dialed in. So with that said, let's look at your calendar over these next 10 weeks. What do you have? And she was like, in week 6, that weekend was her brother's wedding. And so I was like, okay, your brother's wedding is that weekend. Are you going to be willing to get your workouts in and eat this particular way and not drink alcohol during that wedding? And I was like, honestly, I don't really care what your answer is. I just care that you're honest with yourself and that you have some sort of a plan. And so she thought about it for a little bit, and she's like, you know what? It's me and my brother's wedding. I'm going to want to enjoy. I'm going to want to celebrate. I'm going to want to have a piece of wedding cake and drink a little bit. And I was like, that's completely fine with me. I'm not going to tell you how you're supposed to act at your brother's wedding. But just to let you know, like, you're not going to lose 2 pounds during that week, probably. And so maybe we can set the goal to keep the weight the same through that week. And so instead of setting the goal at 8 pounds, we set it like 18. And then we found a few other things throughout the 10-week time frame that brought the goal back down to like 14 or whatnot. And so I don't think it's about necessarily, I don't like the word cheating. But I don't think necessarily completely depriving yourself of alcohol or eating any kind of sweets, if that's what you actually care to do. It's understanding the trade-off. It's, if I do that, I'm not going to achieve as much of a result or be able to achieve as lofty of a goal. And if you're willing to accept that, then so be it. Then you'll be willing to make that trade-off of I might drink a little bit of alcohol or I might have a little bit of wedding cake. But if you're like, nope, I want to be able to really achieve that lofty goal, then you're more able to be like, okay, I know why I'm looking to make this sacrifice this weekend. I'm willing to make it. And so I really believe that oftentimes that topic needs to be discussed through the lens of understanding the trade-off and you just making a conscious decision as to which decision you're going to make and which trade-off you're willing to make.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with, because we deal with this, through drugs and alcohol, same sort of thing. You're going to a wedding, how's that going to look? So I think the more comfortable a person is with that decision, the easier it is. But it definitely seems like, because the people outside can think you're weird, right? Like it makes them uncomfortable. Like, why aren't you having cake? What's going on? Why don't you want to do this? You have to be pretty strong as an individual in your trajectory, because it's almost as if the world doesn't conspire for your greatest good. It's like the opposite. And so you really have to be like strong. And I like how you really have a plan going into these things, so people aren't like, blindsided and then there's failure because they couldn't have possibly predicted that they'd have cake in their face. Like, you already know that's going to happen. So let's just prepare you for the best case, whatever scenario you might be confronted with, because people don't make it easy.
No doubt about that. And I think that's something that I talk about with some of my clients, but I'd actually like to hear your thoughts about that, because I think I tell people sometimes you want to maybe communicate with your friends or family, whoever you're going to be with, in advance. Like, hey, this is really important to me. Like, I have this goal that I'm looking to achieve. This is what I'm not going to do. I'm asking that you would support me. Now, that's a whole lot easier of a conversation to tell somebody to have than to actually have.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what are some other strategies that you recommend people so that they can feel confident in either abstaining or doing something that is not necessarily the norm in that environment?
I think you're absolutely right. Is the people that are close to you sort of pre-framing that, like, hey, just so you know, I'm coming, want to be there, want to be supportive. Right now, I'm not drinking or I'm not having bad food. I'm fully don't care about what you're doing, but that's just where I'm at. I think that's a great way, just setting those boundaries before you get there. And then I think another big one is not making a big deal of it. I think when people are like, I'm not drinking right now, and everyone's like, oh, okay. You just kind of like, I don't want to say de-yell it, but you don't draw attention to it. That way, nobody even notices. And odds are they're going to move on. They're going to quit peer pressuring. But I think the people that are close to you, it's an honest conversation. Like, look, right now, that's just not what I'm doing. I have this bigger goal. And so that's what I'm staying focused on. And so if you see me slipping, give me a nudge back in that direction. But, besides that, sometimes you just got to leave early. Like, a lot of people, it's too much. Like, the temptation is too large, whether it's bad food or drinking or whatever it is. And they don't have a strong enough foundation to handle it. So they go make an appearance and then they're out before things get crazy or before the pressure is too much. They have a good exit plan in advance of when that's going to look like.
Yeah, I like it. Because like one of the things that I would have somebody do if they went into a situation like that is I oftentimes ask people, if you were to do the thing that you're planning on not to do, like, what would your excuse be, or why do you think you would make that decision? And like, come up with an answer preemptively and be like, okay, what can you do to make sure that you don't make that excuse or you don't have that reason? And maybe it's like, when I think I want to have this, I have that instead. Or maybe it's like, you know what? If I stay too long, I'm going to be tempted too much. I need to go home at a particular time. Or maybe it's like, I need to make sure I eat before I go so that I'm not tempted to have whatever it is that is in front of me. And so different tools like that are sometimes what I use with my clients as well.
Absolutely. And I am, and I have no problem being this person. I bring my own special creamer. I bring my stevia. I bring my special, keto chocolates because I want dessert. And I'm totally fine giving up that cake if I have my own dessert. So I also come prepared, like prepped, so that I can still partake with everybody, but not partake what they're partaking, but still sort of be part of everything. And that's just become my new norm. I mean, I've got a meat stick in my purse, like 24/7. If I need to eat, like, fine, at least I got something good I can eat. And I think preparation is a big part of it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I love that.
Yeah. So now when you're working with people, so here's my question. and when I started CrossFit, that was my big thing. I want to lose weight. I want to lose weight. And and I'm not losing weight, and I'm in here every day. And what's happening? And my trainer was like, dude, I want you to go home, grab your scale. And I'm like, uh-huh. And she's like, go outside, put it behind your tire and run it over like 15 times because you are adding muscle. Muscle weighs more than fat. You might have a goal of losing weight, but that doesn't mean your body's going to respond with a poundage because muscle weighs more. So look in the mirror. How are your clothes fitting? How are they looking? You know, you're going to go through this odd like transition with your body where maybe it seems like you're getting bigger, but you're not. You're actually adding muscle and you're taking away fat. And so there's a whole thing there, especially for women, with the whole scale and pounds and that equaling your wins or success.
Yeah. No, I think it's definitely beginning on the re-education process and the reframing process of what the scale is actually telling you.
Yeah.
Literally just educating them about what the different factors are that are encompassing what your body weight actually is. And then talking about the standpoint, okay, we're doing strength training and you actually haven't done as much strength training as you have in the past. You are going to add some muscle. And so while you think you're not losing weight, what you're doing is you're actually probably just having a different body composition where you're adding a little bit of muscle and losing a little bit of body fat. And so it is educating them about that, I think, is one of the biggest things. I also think that the scale is such a tricky conversation, and I'm always careful to navigate it as gracefully or as adeptly as I possibly can, because I know a lot of people have different emotional triggers when it comes to the scale and stuff like that. And so I think it's one, you got to make sure, this is the biggest thing, that you don't define your own self-worth or you don't put your identity on what the number is that pops up, because that's a lot of what we do. I think another one is, especially comes up for females a decent amount, is what I kind of said is oftentimes people have a number in their head that they felt best at in the past. And so they think that I was this number in high school, or I was this number in college, or I was this number before I had kids. And so I've got to get back to this number. And they simply have that belief because that's when they felt best, if you will. But I have like a particular client who's always relatively thin build, but has had a few kids, but she had never really done any strength training in the past. And I made sure to let her know that you're really going to form a new baseline. Because all of your body weight that you've ever measured in the past, basically you've had the same amount of muscle. If anything, maybe it's just been gradually, slowly but surely, maybe declining, but you've really had no muscle. So that's the only time it's fluctuated up or down is like water weight or body fat. So anytime you did weigh more, it was probably because you had more body fat on you. But now you're going to actually be increasing your muscle mass a little bit. So you kind of have to have a new baseline for what you're going to weigh, because now muscle mass is actually a factor in what that body weight is reading. And so it's not just body fat going up or down or not. So educating that on them, educating that is really important. And I think making sure people's expectations are important as well with regards to how fast they might be losing or not losing. Yeah, the scale is such a tricky thing. I probably can come up with some more other topics up top in the future, but that's what I have off the top of my head. But the scale is a tough one.
The scale's a tough one. So what I started doing, and I'm sure I learned this from one of the thousands of programs that I did, but it was really good for me, is body measurements. So I would measure, my biceps, my this, my that, maybe once a month, check in. Even on 75 hard, I did this because, again, I'm trying not to fixate on the scale. But then I was able to see, okay, maybe I only lost like 3 pounds, but I lost like 15 inches from all the places. Or, you start to see that your biceps are getting bigger, but your waist is getting smaller. Like, it's a good measurement, secondary measurement besides a scale, to really see the progress, because it happens so slow in our minds, we don't see it. And then we run into somebody who hasn't seen us in a while and they're like, oh my God, look at you. And you're like, wait, what? And so it's a good way to, for what I found to help me stay motivated, is that measuring made a big difference in my life. So I started to get away from the scale a bit.
Yeah, and we're just talking about measuring body composition, but I think measuring performance is another huge
Mm,
motivator. That's one of the things that I do in my program is in week one, we do what I call performance tests, where people do a baseline of tests that are
hmm
very well rounded, upper body strength, lower body strength, core strength, cardiovascular endurance, and that stuff to see where they currently stand. And then we do them again in week 10. And throughout the 10 weeks,
mm.
we're doing specific things to obviously improve our performance there. And so I find that oftentimes people come into my program thinking they have a focus on changing how they look when then they become so much more interested and motivated by their own performance. And so
Yeah.
having something that is not as body composition focused and having something that's more performance focused, I think can be a really powerful way to keep people motivated and have a have another definition of success rather than just body composition, if you will. And it's a little bit
For
more,
sure.
I find that it tends to be more predictable to see improvement, at least like across the board, like percentage wise, if you will. People who achieve goals in my program from a performance standpoint, like really large percentage. People who achieve goals from a body composition standpoint, still a large percentage, but it's going to be a little bit different because sometimes people's goals are a little bit off. And it's just like the amount of how much of their goal, like maybe they see some progress, but not maybe as much of the progress as they originally set out. And so, anyways, I think it's just a great way to have that performance definition of success because that is a little bit even more of like who you are as a person rather than just a number on a scale.
Yeah, well, and that's the beauty of CrossFit, right? Like everything is a PR. You're always trying to improve your speed, your weight, your lift, whatever it is. It's a constant measuring and striving towards do better than before. Like I'll have brand new clients come in straight out of detox and they're like, God, does it ever get easier? And I'm like, no, it actually doesn't. And it's designed that way because if it becomes easy, you're not getting any gains. You're just basically going through the motion. So it doesn't. And the more you do, the more you can lift, the faster you can go. It's just as arduous the whole time, but now you're hitting these milestones or these things that you weren't able to do before, or lift heavier, or maintain that, but at a faster rate or whatever it is. It's pretty cool. Metrics are amazing. I think they're such a great motivator for sure.
Yeah. I think that I don't think it gets easier. I think that your tolerance to pain becomes a little bit higher. I think that, for example, for me or you, somebody who might be a little bit more experienced to make muscle gains or strength gains, we're going to actually have to endure more pain than somebody who is a little bit more beginner type status.
Yeah.
Because their tolerance to pain, like, if you're just talking about muscle gain from like feeling the pump of the muscle or whatever, sometimes people have no idea sometimes what it actually means to actually get a good muscle pump or actually get close to failure or actually really push themselves up to their edge of potential. And so
Mm.
I think the more advanced you get, and this is really in anything, your tolerance to pain or whatever it is in different areas of life just you become more resilient and you can keep pushing past that for longer.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, and then you start to sort of crave it, like you want it. Like if I leave the gym on a heavy lift day and I don't feel it the next day, I think I did something wrong. I'm like, why am I not sore? Like I lifted so heavy, maybe it wasn't that heavy. So it can kind of work against you or for you in the other direction too, where you reframe your brain to like expect it and appreciate it because that means you did a good job. At least that's what I've done with my brain for sure.
I like it.
Yeah. And then I also have noticed that well, and of course, this is 12 years in, I just don't feel a sore or fatigued anymore. Now it's just sort of normal. So um, that's not a bad thing. It's a great thing, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. I think soreness is tricky because I think a lot of us love the feeling of being sore or love the feeling of being fatigued, but I think studies show that there's not necessarily a direct correlation between being sore and growing muscle. Now, there might be some sort of an
Mm,
indirect correlation to it. But that doesn't mean like I don't want to feel sore. Like I still want to feel sore. I do. I think it's still a pretty good metric of whether you pushed yourself um, past where you had pushed yourself in the past. But for
mm,
example, like actually, if you're simply looking to build strength, then soreness isn't probably what you are wanting to even experience compared to like if you're looking to build muscle. So if you're just being able to do a bench press 1 rep max for heavier, then your volume is going to
Mhm.
be low of like overall reps and sets, if you will, compared to if you are looking to grow a particular muscle group, your volume has to be a little bit higher. And usually volume is more correlated with soreness than, so high
Mm.
volume is correlated with more soreness than low volume is. And so, if you're looking to just build strength and you just have a heavy lifting day, oftentimes you shouldn't or won't feel sore. And so understanding that I think is important for some people as well, because sometimes we only correlate. I only had a good workout if I'm feel dead, or I only had a good workout if I'm really brutally sore the next day, when that's actually not always the case.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is, what supplements are you taking? What food are you eating to sort of counteract that? You could be doing the same work, but you have enough fish oil in your body and enough protein where you're not feeling the ill effects. Whereas if somebody has a crappy diet and then they go lift, they're going to feel it a lot worse than a person who's really dialed in on their health and nutrient side of things.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed.
What is your biggest challenge? Is it keeping people motivated halfway through? Is it getting people started, maintaining the wins? What do you think is the biggest challenge?
That's a good question. I think that I know that I always experience in the middle of the 10 weeks. I would say it's around anywhere from week 4 to 7, where there is
Mhm.
an inevitable, for some people, and for some people, greater degrees of it than others, but to some degree of lapse of motivation. I mean, and for the
Mm.
reasons why I believe it's not new and shiny anymore, and I'm not almost close to that finish line. It's like the same reason why the third lap of a 1 mile run is the most brutal lap ever, because you're not fresh
Ugh.
anymore. You're not close to the finish line, and you're just absolutely grinding and in the middle of hell at the moment. And so
Yeah.
one of the things that I always tell people in the beginning, that when they're building their why is like, usually coming up with a why in the beginning somewhat seems fruitless, because in the beginning you are motivated and you don't really feel like you need this few sentences of why I'm getting started, because you know why you clicked purchased, or you know why you clicked buy now to enter the program, or you know why you did whatever when you started. But then oftentimes when you get a little bit in the thick of it, you don't remember why as much. And so I tell people that your why isn't just what gets you started, but it's what keeps you going when what you started gets tough. And so
Mm.
why that I have people to build out is identify what you're working away from, identify what you don't want to have happen, identify who you do want to become and what you do want to have happen. And then 3, what I touched on earlier, is who are you doing this for? And so I think one of the first things that I help people to remember and recall during that lapse of motivation is remember why you started in the first place. And I feel like that's somewhat cliche, but if you actually thoughtfully came up with a few sentences as to why, and it actually was deep-seated motivation, then it might not make you feel not motivated to like, oh my gosh, you're right, that's why I wanted to do it. But it might be that little extra thing to actually go to the gym that day. It might be that little extra
Yeah.
thing to, instead of Uber Eats something, make something at home. So I think that's really a big one. But I think that the hardest thing is what we touched on earlier, is to get people to transition their habits into their identity. It's
Mm.
people have lived in their routines and their habits for so long, and they've been baked into their lifestyle for so long, that it takes so many repetitions in order to create that new lifestyle. And I do believe that the way that you talk to yourself about yourself is one of the biggest pieces of leverage that you can use in order to make that transition from habit to identity. To I always catch people when they say I'm trying to do something when it's always been this way, or I've never been able to do it. I always acknowledge like, okay, it's always been the way until now, but it can be different now moving forward. So for example, I'll never forget when one of my clients said something as simple as, my husband's going to be out of town this weekend and I always eat like crap when he's out of town. And I'm like, well, no, maybe in the past you've always eaten bad when he's out of town, but that doesn't have to be your future story. It will continue to be your future story if you tell yourself that, but you have the ability to change that story. And let's come up with, how can it actually look different in a way that maybe you even enjoy? I think that would be a big part of changing the habit, is making it something that you actually enjoy or doesn't have that much friction, and you can do it relatively easily. And so I do believe that it's kind of back to the conversation. What is the hardest thing that I might experience is transitioning people from habits to identity. And it's a part of who they are, because I think a lot of people will see themselves in the mirror in a particular way. And that could be, when I say see themselves in the mirror, that could be actually physically, or just kind of like psychologically. You're looking at yourself in the mirror and you think like, I've never been really healthy, or I've never been really fit, or I've never been a runner, or I've never been strong. And it takes a lot of times of looking at yourself in the mirror and knocking that old story out of yourself, to be able to allow yourself to do the actions to live into the different story. And so I think that would be the hardest thing, is like making sure the habits are done repeatedly enough so that you can really believe that's who you are now.
Well, you hit such an important piece, and we actually have that as part of the Elevate program as well, is negative self-talk. But it's usually so unconscious that the individual doesn't even realize that they're saying or thinking it. It's just such a pattern that's generated, and they've abided by that unless they verbalize it to somebody. At least this happened for me. I wasn't even aware I was talking to myself this way until someone said, "Hey, would you say that to a friend of yours?" And I'm like, "No." And they're like, "Would you say it to your enemy?" I'm like, "No," because I think I was calling myself fat or something like that. And they're like, "Why is that okay for you to say to yourself?" And it was like the first time somebody had like actually caught me doing it and brought my awareness to it. And then I became hyper aware of not just what I think, but what do I verbally say. And I think that's just such a commonality with people with weight loss, with addiction, with all that, is that negative self-talks due to failures and all the other things keeps people in that place of not improving, because they're like their own worst enemy, literally.
Yeah. And, I feel like a lot, this podcast is obviously health and fitness, and I've mentioned weight loss a lot, but like you said, it's with everything. Like, I know I try to identify those sort of patterns with myself, whether it's in my business or in another area of my life, is what is a narrative that I am continuing to tell myself that no longer actually serves me, and that I can actually intentionally change so that I can make progress in that area of my life. I know for a while, one of the things that I feel like held me back kind of subconsciously from a business standpoint is, a long time after college, I saw myself as the young entrepreneur who's just out of college, who's just grinding. And I kind of like loved that identity of myself, but that also held me back from doing some things that I wouldn't have otherwise done, because I didn't think I was at that next level yet, or it prevented me from reaching out to somebody, or for being in a particular room. And that was not serving me. And I luckily identified it, and I don't know if 100% of it is shed, or if 70% of that is shed, or if I only have that self-talk 10% of the time now. But it's important to recognize those things that you're subconsciously saying to yourself that need to be reprogrammed.
That's a big part of it, is the reprogramming. And a lot of it is so it's just tricky. You don't even know it's there until someone like you comes along and asks those really good questions that prompts this always happens when blah blah blah. Like, it's great that you utilize that, and you format, it sounds like a co-collaboration with somebody of your 10-week program together to set them up for success and identify things that they wouldn't normally, just by doing Jenny Craig or one of these other things. Like, you're actually working with them psychologically, mindset, physically, mentally, all together to get the best product.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I love hearing from clients the most, actually, is oftentimes people who are doing it for the first time think they're signing up for a fitness program. And then they realize a few weeks in, they're like, oh, wait, this is a lot more than just coming to a workout. And I think that's one of the things that almost lights me up the most, is realizing that other people see that it's actually much different and much deeper than that.
Yeah. And so what do you do? Do you guys like do you have a special diet that you give to everybody? Do you work on what's appropriate for the individual in front of you? Like, how do you determine what's a good diet for someone?
Yeah, the way that I approach it is definitely individual by individual. I have my thought processes is in my philosophies and my approach to nutrition, but I think it always starts on figuring out where somebody is. Some people come to me and they've tracked macros before and they know all that kind of stuff, and maybe they want to do that again. And if they want to do that again, I ask them why and figure all that out. And if they want to do that again, let's go for it. And I'll give them recommendations for where they should be, etc. But some people might come in and they're eating fast food regularly. They don't cook. And so that person's approach is obviously going to be 10 times different. And so I would say that my nutrition advice initially for somebody starts off by figuring out where you currently are and where you actually want to be, because some people will do, if somebody has, like somebody last 10-week transformation with me wanted to put on some muscle mass and they were a little bit more seasoned with their fitness approach. And so we talked about protein, we talked about carbohydrate timing, we talked about all macros and timing of macros and stuff like that, kind of some like kind of next level nutrition stuff. When some people, it might just be, let's make sure we eat grocery store bought meals for 6 lunches this week. And that might be their nutrition. So again, it can kind of like one extreme to the other. I would say that one of the foundational things that I throw at people a lot or recommend people a lot is, like, if you want to track your protein, I'd recommend that can be a really good way to achieve a lot of different goals. And then fiber would be a really good way to achieve a lot of goals as well. So it's kind of like eat real food, maybe track protein, maybe track fiber. That's usually where I kind of start with a lot of people, because protein and fiber are a lot easier to track than tracking all of your macros. And they will help to both get you healthy and potentially lose body fat as well.
I love that. Yeah, I tried the whole tracking thing. I hated it. Measuring and tracking and macros, just never for me. There were times where I would do the food journaling back in the day, but now I kind of just like, I realize that I like to eat. I don't like to measure. So I now intermittent fast because I realize like I don't like to measure. So I'll eat one meal a day, sometimes two, all protein, whatever's keto, like dairy, a little bit of fruit, some vegetable, but I just stick to that, and then I'm good. I've been able to maintain, but I am not. The whole counting thing. Ugh. It's like,
Yeah.
gosh, man, there's so much better things I could be doing with my time. But I do understand for some people when they're really trying to dial it in like 100%, that's a really important part for them. For me, not so much. I'd rather just eat the foods that I know are good for me and not have to worry about how much I'm eating.
Yeah, again, it's kind of like what's your goal and how do you want to predictably or reliably get there? Because when it comes to, because I have never for an extended period of time tracked my calories and macros either. I've done it for shorter periods of time,
Mhm.
but it is the most reliable and predictable way to get to a particular point. I would say mainly from a maybe body composition standpoint. Like, you're going to see any bodybuilder track their macros because they need to be a little bit more dialed in. But that's, again, their goal is super high. It's really extreme. And so it takes being dialed in from those things. And so if that's the most predictable and reliable way, then I think that tracking protein and fiber is a low time or low energy way to do the same thing to an extent. Because usually if you're eating enough high quality protein, at least, then you're getting the amount of protein that you need to be hitting, and then potentially getting a lot of the healthy fats that you need to be getting from the protein as well. And then if you're also tracking fiber, then you're getting high quality carbohydrates, because the low quality carbohydrates are usually the ones that don't have a good fiber to overall carbohydrate ratio. And so if you're eating enough real foods, enough veggies, fruits, nuts, seeds, and good grains and stuff like that, then, and you're just focused on fiber, then you'll probably get to your healthy carbohydrates as well. And then usually the things that you cook that stuff with also need some healthy fats, because you're making your vegetables with extra virgin olive oil and things like that. And so
Mhm.
tracking protein and fiber, what I communicate to people is like, if you want to track your macros, great. This could be an easier way to kind of do the same thing, but it's a whole lot less laborious than tracking every single meal and every single aspect of every meal.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and it's funny, the more you like start going down the rabbit hole, the more I know for like I've been doing a long time, a lot of people I talk to, it's like, I don't even like to eat out anymore because what kind of oil are they using? They could be using like vegetable oil and what's in that sauce? It tastes really good. Oh, there's probably a ton of sugar in there. And it's like, it kind of ruins it for you. You know, you can't really like enjoy things the way you used to because you start becoming knowledgeable of why does that taste so good or why is it like that or what are they doing with that. I mean, food's very expensive. Do you really think they're using top of the line organic everything when you go out to eat? Probably not. And so like I know for myself, I just don't eat out unless it's a social occasion with family out of town or something like that. Well, out of town obviously, but I just avoid it because I'm just so distrusting of even what they're putting in our foods, if it's even if I consider that it's probably healthy for me.
Yeah, no, and that's one of the things I communicate to people as well, and that's one of the things I'm actually always mindful of myself is if I am tracking more closely, I don't want it to lead to any kind of obsessive behavior, and that's what I really want to make sure that anytime somebody I'm coaching says they're going to track their macros, I usually am like, have you ever done it before? Have you ever had any problems with it? Like, I want to make sure that it doesn't lead to this obsessive behavior because it can. Because of the way that I kind of, I feel similarly to you is I eat home for at least 80% of my meals, if not more. But when I go out, I also try to keep things in perspective to not have that
Mhm.
obsessive personality. It's like, okay, it's not going to kill me to have this every once in a while. And maybe there's times where I just make as good a decision as I can. But I think keeping things in perspective as well of, this doing it this one time is probably not going to be that big a deal. Or if you do it this one time every so often, it's probably not going to make that big of a deal. So I think perspective is huge in not letting the tracking every single gram of whatever goes into your body leads to any kind of obsessiveness about it.
Oh, it's so hard though, because you start seeing the direct correlation. And then, usually going out, it's also a social occasion. It's where you're with friends and you're with family. But then when you realize what you're eating, even though it seems healthy, you don't lose your weight. It throws you out of ketosis or it throws everything off and you thought you were eating the right things. But then you want to give up all social, scenarios because you're like, I want to stay in charge of my diet. So it's a tricky, it can be tricky for sure, but I agree with you. Like, there's just certain things where quality and time is more important than
Yeah.
staying so rigid that you can't even enjoy yourself.
Like I said, it's all about trade-offs, and I'm not saying that there's ever a right or necessarily a wrong approach, if you will. I think one of the things that I am always conscious of is, well, I mean, for me, it's making sure that I know that if I'm drinking, then I'm not going to get results as quickly enough. But like maybe I don't care because I'm having a good time with friends or whatever. But yeah, I think understanding it kind of goes back to the timeline thing that I mentioned earlier. If you're going to a wedding and you're going to accept that you're not going to make as much progress with your goal, but you're okay with that trade-off, be okay with that trade-off. I think it just takes, and I think where people see now we're kind of talking more people who are really healthy
Yeah.
rather than people who are maybe, well, it tends to be people who are more really healthy, I think, who have some of these thoughts and get really into their head about it. But I think, oh man, I kind of just lost my train of thought of where I was going with that. But anyways, I'll probably come back to it here in a few
It's
minutes.
it's kind of like that with everything though, right? Like just like when we're starting to work out or we're starting to eat right. It's like little bits are huge in the beginning, but then the longer you do it and the more you do it and the better you are, you got to just sort of keep fine tuning and realizing, what works, what doesn't work, and everybody's different. Like every single person, uh they just acclimate to things, and it shouldn't be like a struggle. Like it should be like, I like doing this. I feel good when I do that. I recognize now when I eat like crap, I do bad in the gym, or, you got to do it long enough where you can start to see like the benefits, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely, when you can start to see the benefits, that will that's one of the biggest motivators in what kind of action that you take, no doubt.
Right. Well, and also, I mean, I'm sure you experience this because I know I do, that people, you can't go to the gym and work out really hard, but then have a terrible diet and expect to see results on the outside. Like, really, it's like, I think 80% diet and 20% of the work that you do in the gym.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, when people say that, I think that's mainly from the perspective of, I want to know where the origin of that came from because I'm very interested in it. But to me, I think the 80-20 thing, obviously the 80-20 rule, Pareto's principle, it's a thing. I think why
Yeah.
it applies, how it applies to health and fitness, if you will, is mainly from a caloric expenditure standpoint because
Hmm.
the amount of exercise that you do, if we're talking about your metabolic rate and how many calories you're expending on a daily basis, there's your basal metabolic rate, there is your exercise activity thermogenesis, there's your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, your NEAT, and then your thermic effect of food. And so it's your BMR, your basal metabolic rate, that is responsible for the most amount of calories that you're going to burn on a daily basis. Your NEAT, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, is the next highest one that's responsible for how many calories you burn. Then after that, it's your exercise activity thermogenesis. But depending on the person, that's only going to account for 5 to maybe 20% of the overall calories that you burn on a regular basis. And then thermic effect of food, which is basically the amount of energy that your body has to use to break down the food that you eat. And so if we're talking about the number of calories that you're burning on a regular basis, then exercise activity actually has a whole lot smaller of a percentage of it than what people think.
Mm.
Oftentimes people use their wearable devices and see that they're burning 300, 400, 500,
Mhm.
600, 700 calories, however many during their workout. But it's like if you weren't doing that workout, you would still be burning maybe 30, 40, 50% of those calories. And then that extra 200 or 300 calories that you burn, it's not necessarily as big of a deal that people give it credit for, and where you can really move the needle with this from the standpoint of like either eating in a calorie surplus if that's your goal, or eating in a calorie deficit if that's your goal. Is the nutrition lever is the one that is more impactful in creating that energy surplus or energy deficit that needs to be created in order
Mhm.
to or lose. And so nutrition is super important, and
Yeah.
and I think it's huge in body composition. But I think exercise might be even more important from like aging well and like staying
Mm.
strong and being able to stay physically active. It's hard to say what's more or less important, right? Like I think it's, if somebody says
Yeah.
one's more important, one's less important, it just depends on the person and what their situation is. But I think 80-20, that's, I think, the case from maybe a body composition and when you're talking energy deficit, energy surplus, but that's not all of our goals at any point in time. And so I think people shouldn't discredit fitness from that standpoint, at least.
Absolutely. And likewise, like, a calorie isn't a calorie. Like, it's not equal. You can't have a calorie from a Snicker and think that that's equivalent to like healthy meat just because of calories. So you can't live in a deficit and expect to be healthy just because you're eating less calories than you're expending, because there is the nutritional component to that as well.
Yeah, well, and that goes back to one of the things that I was not coming top of mind with the conversation about the scale is just because you're hitting a certain number on the scale does not mean you're actually healthy. That is that's one
Yeah.
of a whole list of biomarkers, of health markers that are going to determine how healthy you are or are not. And like you said, like if you're eating 100 calories of a Snickers bar versus 100 calories of grass-fed beef, like
Mm.
sure, maybe in the short run, your body weight's going to stay the same, but does that mean your blood sugar levels are going to be the same? Does that mean your energy levels are same? Does that mean your mood is going to be the same? Like there's so many different things. I mean, your digestion is going to be the same. Like there's your body composition. Is that going to be the same? Like maybe it does the same thing to your body weight in the short run, but maybe that means your body fat goes up a little bit and maybe you have a little bit less muscle mass. And so um, ensuring that you're never that you have a holistic definition of success when it comes to health and fitness. It's not just like just the scale is going to be my metric of whether or not I'm doing well. It needs to be the scale and like your fasting insulin levels and like your visceral fat levels. And like if you can run for a particular period of time, or your heart rate can be elevated for a particular period of time. And can you lift a certain amount? Like, right, there's so many different things that people need to ensure that they give value to,
Yeah.
rather than putting the number on the scale as a pedestal. Because I think that's one of the biggest things that really people get wrong, is they put the number on the scale as a pedestal, because that's always been the easiest way to define success with health and
Yeah.
fitness. But now we're so lucky that instead of just performance things, we have so many other ways that we can get feedback as to whether or not we are getting healthier or in better shape. And we need to leverage those tools and often put those in a higher pedestal than just body weight itself.
Yeah. Well, no, I think there has to be this whole almost like reprogramming, because it seems like as Americans, we have, we were, I know for myself, raised on like the supersize, more is better. And it was abundance as opposed to like, and it was quantity as opposed to quality. And I always get a good reminder of this when I fast, because at first it's really hard and I go through being hungry and then I get used to it. Then you hit this like, yeah, okay, I got this. But then I start to, add food back in. And then I realize how grossly I can overeat, and I don't need that much food to survive. But somehow, like for me, growing up poor, you eat everything on your plate, you get programmed into quantity, quantity, quantity. Whereas you could spend the same amount of money, but have quality and eat significantly less, and your body and mind are going to be so much healthier.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about that. I think culturally, we have we have come to really put food on such a pedestal, and I think food should be celebrated, but the way that we do it oftentimes is incorrect. And I think oftentimes we eat just because it's mealtime, not because we're actually hungry. And yeah,
Yeah.
there's that, the quantity and quality and culture and all that kind of stuff is a whole conversation in and of itself, but no doubt.
Yeah. All right, good. So you have your 10, do you have your, I know we could talk about this for hours. I love talking about this stuff, but you have your 10-week transformation. You also do your personal coaching, and you are also a speaker.
I am.
All of the above. What else are you working on these days?
Those are the main things that I do. I mean, I have my own podcast called the Best You Podcast. And so,
Oh, nice.
I interview people on how to become closer to the best version of yourself, mainly health and fitness perspective. So I've been doing that, for 6 years now. So I got the Best You Podcast, 10-week transformation, and I'm a speaker, and I'm getting married here pretty soon. So, that's a
Oh,
big step
wow.
in my life. But yeah, that's what I've got going on from a business perspective.
Congratulations. When is that coming?
Thank you. September 27th.
Ooh, how exciting. That is a new chapter right there.
Yeah, I'm really excited. We're in planning phase. We're kind of in the middle of, when you first get it booked, you have a lot of things to figure out. We're in a little bit of a lull, and then in a couple months we'll have a lot more things we gotta
Oh, yeah. And
button.
then it's just so fast. Significantly easier for the man, though. Usually the woman's been thinking about this her whole life, and so she's like, I got this. Awesome. So what do you love about speaking? So, that's where I met you. You were at Ken's thing, and you gave an amazing presentation. Like, what do you like about speaking?
Well, thank you. I think that, and my initial thought in response to that question is, I do think that it's ingrained in my personality to like, um I've always been an energetic type person, and I've always loved creating an atmosphere for people. I think one of the first, I've always been that kind of like energizer bunny type person, and I was like the captains of my sports teams and stuff. And then when I first started coaching group fitness classes, is when I really put a
Mm.
finger on the fact that I love creating high energy, motivational type atmospheres for people, because I love seeing people to be able to do things that they weren't able to do in the past. And then I think, like, when it comes to specifically speaking, I've loved watching other people speak. I've loved watching YouTube videos. I love listening to podcasts. Like I love speakers because they've impacted me in such a profound way over the years. And I would
Mhm.
love the ability to make those same sort of impact for other people. But I think I just also on just a more like human level, I just like enjoy being in front of people. Like I
Yeah.
enjoy the thrill that it brings. I enjoy the excitement that it brings. Sure, I get nervous, but I think changing the mindset of I'm not up there for me, I'm up there for them helps to
Yeah.
calm that down at least a little bit. And so I don't know. I think I love performing for people. I love serving people. I love having energy in front of people. I love motivation. I love education. I think all those things kind of factor into enjoying speaking.
Yeah, I think that's a commonality a lot of us share. I know that's why I started this podcast. Similar reasons. It's like if I could just reach one person in need or somebody who needs help and just offer one piece of something to give them some solace, then why would I not want to do this? Like I think it becomes much bigger than us individually, just up there having our day in the sun. It's more like, how can we be of service? And obviously, the bigger the room, the more people we could hopefully help or be of service to.
Yeah, and honestly, on a deeper level, I'm a person of faith, and I really believe that part of and my business is called Best You, and my whole mission in my life is to get closer to the best version of yourself. And I think the best version of yourself is both discovered and created. Discovered
Mm,
meaning I think that God gave us unique personality, unique talents, unique skills, etc. And it's our duty and responsibility to uncover what those things are and utilize them to the best of our ability. And I think part of some of the uniqueness of the personality and skills that he gave me align with being a speaker. And
yeah.
so I do almost feel like it's part of who I'm supposed to become
Mhm.
because of those things, I think.
Yeah. It's like your calling. It's why it's your purpose. It's why you're here. Yeah. It is a different skill set, being able to speak to a big group of people as opposed to one on one. Like I've been around, I mean, just tons of people over my years, and there's some that are very good just one on one. Like they're going to get right to what's going on with you, and then there's others where it's like they're good with a whole group, but it's definitely not something that's um, normal or natural. So the fact that you're able to do it really well, I think, is good because not a lot of people can speak to large groups and have an impact like that. So you do a really good job with that.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I do think that sometimes it almost helps when you're speaking to large groups. It depends why you're where you're getting your nerves from, but I think sometimes it can
Yeah.
help if the size of the group is one of the biggest causes for nerves, then act as if you're talking to one person in the audience, at least for a little
Yeah.
bit of time until you become more comfortable with it. And I think that can humanize the humanize speaking for somebody instead of thinking like, oh, I'm on stage, there's lights. It's like, no, you're just talking to somebody.
Yeah. 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 So if we were to do a huge group fitness class, would it be more like hit style? What would a big group fitness class look like?
Uh,
Are we warming up? Are we doing
yeah, well,
it?
I get fired up. I do fitness events here in Nashville every once in a while.
Yeah.
It really just depends because I do a lot of different sizes of fitness. So like my 10-week transformation ranges anywhere from 6 to 16 people. And so that's one style of fitness where there's barbells, dumbbells, kettlebells, body weight, sled,
Mm,
TRX, assault bike, all those kinds of things that I'll program for that size of a group and given the space that I have in a gym. But if it's a large group at a fitness event or something like that, and it's going to be a group of 20 plus, 30 plus, all the way to 80. And maybe I don't have a whole idea of what everybody's fitness level is going to be coming in. Then I like doing body weight exercises and I like going to the beat of the music. So that's
mm.
that I do at the fitness events is doing like squats to the beat of the music, or like push-ups to the beat of the music, or like shoulder taps to the beat of the music, and it keeps people fun and
Mm.
engaged. And I find that when you're doing something to the beat of the music, you push yourself further because that next beat is coming rather than just stopping because you're fatigued. And so if I was doing a large fitness event,
Oh.
that would be a little bit more what it looks like.
I love that. And it's fun. Like sometimes when we have warm-ups and I'm not the best coach. I don't have like a lot of the knowledge as far as body physicality or whatever. But I like to do fun warm-ups. I don't do boring ones, but I like there's it's called Sally. There's a Sally on the up and there's another one. And if I don't know what to do, I'll just put on that music and they have to squat every time they say, "Oh, Sally." Oh, Roxanne is another one. Or they have to do a burpee every time they hear Roxanne. Like nobody likes squats or burpees, but it somehow when you make it with the music and you make it fun and they're like dying, but they're like all still doing it because it's fun and it's to the music and it brings it out of that boring, normal, predictable counting or whatever it is.
For sure. And I think there's a place for both those things, right? Like I think sometimes people who are super technical would demonize a warm up that isn't that structured, but like sure, there are parts of fitness where it needs to be things should have intention and have purpose. And like, why are you doing that? This is why we're doing that. But also, there should just be times where you're just having fun, or like sometimes I know I kick my own butt in the gym when I'm not necessarily looking to get stronger or build muscle or whatever. I just like go hard just because I like going hard sometimes, and I like killing myself times
Yeah.
just to kill myself. And so there needs to be a balance of like obviously a lot of things should be technical and purpose and intentional, but often we need to make sure we're having fun because it's really the fun also that keeps people coming back consistently.
Oh yeah. I think anytime we can add in fun and people realize it doesn't have to be such a, it's not like going to the dentist office. Like we can have fun at this and be working out. Another one I love doing is Tabata workouts because you can get any kind of cheesy off Spotify music in the background. So they're like hitting, and I'll do like ab workouts with the Tabata style with the music in the background. But yeah, I don't know. I think it should be fun. And that's what I like to try to deliver people. Like, yes, it's a gym and we're working out and it's very serious, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be. We can just have a good time. We can high five each other. We can smile. It can be a good time too.
Yeah, I like it.
Especially when, people are hitting PRs and we could cheer for them. That's pretty awesome too.
Yeah.
We just did a fitness comp on Friday and there was 13 teams, which is crazy. So it's staff and clients teaming up. And I had 3 or 4 staff hit PRs in the middle of a fitness comp, which is crazy, but it's because everyone's gathering around and cheering for them and like really pushing that extra motivation and making it fun. And just to see people like get those PRs in a fun environment like that, it's super cool. And I think there's that energy you can draw off of that'll push you way more than just, if you're soloing by yourself in Gold's Gym by yourself with your headphones on.
Yeah, well, I think there's two things that draw out a next level of ourselves. It's the energy from other people, but it's also being put under pressure. Like when other
Yeah.
people are watching you or know what you're trying to achieve, I think that oftentimes we don't put ourselves under enough pressure, whether that's in health and
Mhm.
fitness or any area of our life. And to me, low pressure equals low performance. But if you put yourself
Mm.
under a high level of pressure, then you can expect a higher level of performance. And so whether it's a competition or everybody's watching and cheering you on, like those things can actually call out a next level of yourself that you weren't able to reach individually.
For sure. Well, and that's why I'm such a huge fan too of partner workouts because I know I will push myself a lot harder if I know you're depending on me and you want to do really good. I'll be like, oh, shoot, I got to step it up for this guy because this means a lot to him. So I'm really going to push hard so that we collectively can do good. So I think having other people depend on you really can make things big for you too.
No doubt about it. I love the community aspect and people aspect and all that kind of stuff to fitness for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, can you tell our viewers where they can find you if they want to do a 10-week transformation with you or personal coaching or come to one of your classes?
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. I'm on Instagram at carrier_best you, and then the Best You podcast would be another good way to check in on things. So those two would be great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate our conversation.
Yeah, Angie, it was a blast. It was good to reconnect. Glad you're doing well.
Yeah, same. Awesome. Cool. Well, have a great day.
Sounds good. Appreciate it. You too.